All right, so nuts and bolts night. I'm just going to introduce the counselors really quick. Miss Vega is our brand new counselor. Unfortunately, with the start of school, the stomach bug is starting to go through the school, so she's absent tonight, unfortunately. But we will just go right down the line. So we have Mr. Flynn. You can just do a quick wave. Mrs. Lucia, Mrs. O'Connor, Ms. Ariel, Ms. Boyd, Mr. Diamantopoulos, and Mrs. Rice. So at the very end, we will have breakout sessions where you'll actually be with your students' counselor and ask specific questions. The one thing that I'll talk about first is communication. How do we communicate all of this information to you? I'm hoping that you get my monthly newsletter. I just put one out recently, just to keep you updated on what's happening. There's a whole senior section that will be important. The other piece I want you to pay careful attention to is at the very end of the newsletter, there's a general section. I put a lot of programs in there that might be of interest to families that's open to grades 9 through 12. So there's a lot of different opportunities. When we get into our office, I will post that there as well. Certainly our school counseling website, we've got the calendar up. There's information on SAT and ACT test dates, a lot of resources, and all of the council contacts if you need to look for that. So Naviance, and I'm sure you've all heard of Naviance, we talked about it last year. Naviance is our college career search program that we use. Right now, for all the students, last year, as juniors, we worked on the colleges I'm thinking about list. What's going to happen this year is that list is going to transfer to the colleges I'm applying to. We use Naviance to send all transcripts, letters of recommendations. Most of it is electronically done, depending on the colleges. So if you're applying online through the Common App, that's where everything is going through that. Also on Naviance, we have college visits. The colleges, we have usually about over 100 schools that visit us in the fall. I highly, highly recommend for our students to sign up for these college visits. It is during the school day. We do ask that students do not sign up for more than one a day because we don't want you to miss too many classes. What's important about the college visits is that you can still learn about information from schools. It's an information session. They're there to give you information. But most of the colleges that are there, the college representatives, they are the ones that are reading your applications, okay? So that means for a lot of times I've had students go to college visits, have great conversations, they go to the college, they interview, go for an interview, and the person they interviewed, they've already had that conversation with at the information session. So a lot of times the college representatives will remember the students. So it's a great opportunity to learn more about the school and really ask some detailed questions. One of the most useful things about Naviance is our scattergrams. So Naviance holds about 10 years worth of data of where our students from Shrewsbury High School have been accepted, have been denied, have been waitlisted at schools, what their test scores were, and their GPAs. So it is one piece that can be useful in terms of helping you to determine what are the possibilities that you may be accepted to that school. It's not the one-all be-all, you will be accepted or you're not, because there's so many different parts to the application. But it certainly, it gives you an overview for you to look at. The other thing is all scholarships are pushed out on Naviance. Most scholarships, I will say there's a few early ones. As soon as we get them, we do advertise them to students in Naviance, in Schoology, in morning announcements. I highly recommend for students to really look at what you qualify for and apply. Apply, apply, apply. The reason why is a lot of times we find that not a lot of students are applying for these scholarships, so the opportunity to getting a scholarship is great. I want to say 3 years ago I had Mifa here doing the presenting for the financial aid night, and one of the women that was here assisting said she actually applied for a scholarship and won a scholarship through the Boy Scouts of America because nobody applied. So if you think about those scholarship opportunities out there, you want to make sure, see what you might qualify for, and get those applications in. So pay attention for scholarships. Usually it's right after the college application season. They really start coming in December, January, February. Those 3 months are where you want to start looking at. We will send reminders. The biggest thing that students, and we'll continually remind students, is once a week. Just check the list once a week, designate a one time that you can look, and on Naviance, I believe you can look at a list that you can see new ones pop up. So if they're new for that week, you'll be able to see just that list, because the list will, it'll start to grow. So just to make sure you access all of those resources. Okay, what are the trends? There's been a lot happening in the news, and we'll talk about that with the whole college admissions piece. But in terms of Shrewsbury High School, I'd have to say the people that, the college reps that are readers for Shrewsbury High School, they're readers for the region. So they get to know Shrewsbury High School, they know our diversity, they know our reputation. They, believe it or not, they track students when they get on campus, and they track how the students are doing on campus from whatever school they're coming from. So it's important to know that there's a lot of tracking that happens on the college end in terms of looking at how our Shrewsbury students do. I would have to say I've had 2 kids that have gone through this process. My youngest is now a senior, and Shrewsbury High School has done a wonderful job preparing the students academically, beyond what I thought would happen when they actually got to college. But certainly I'd have to say the preparation here is great. So that part you shouldn't have to worry as much, but more so just in terms of the whole transition piece, which we'll talk about more in the spring. Some of the challenges to college admissions, and I know we've all heard about the varsity blues issue, so that we'll talk about at the very, very end. I'll touch upon that a little bit. But some of the challenges that we really look at are the number of students that are attending college. How many students are applying? And in terms of the number of students, how many applications per student are applying? So we'll talk about some of the numbers, how many you should apply to, and how many is too much. So if you've done your research correctly, you want to make sure that you stay within a certain range, that you've do your due diligence in terms of that search. So we have to look at the impact of the community college, state college, private colleges. They kind of all come into play because students are really have been diverse in terms of their applications. This is a survey from last year. They haven't come out on a new one for this year yet, but for the class of 2018, this survey was done by the College Board in 17 magazine. And they looked at the first one on how students felt during the college application process. So the students said they felt, in terms of their emotions, excited, because this is an exciting time, right? You're getting ready to kind of plan for your life after high school. 41% felt that they were confident, 70% felt that they were stressed, and 49% felt that they were confused. What we're going to hope to do today is kind of diffuse that confusion, because this whole process it's going to seem overwhelming, but we'll kind of break it down for you to kind of ease that piece. The stress piece is certainly something that we are concerned about, and we'll talk about that through some of our curriculum work with our seniors. And things that students wish they had done more or less of during the application process, and this is a national survey. 70% wish that they sought more advice. 65% felt that they could have spent more time on the applications, and 14% wish that they worried less. So what are they nervous about college? They're nervous about the academics, what those expectations are. They're worried about the finances, 40%. They're worried about the social life, what that's going to be like. A lot of conversations in the spring that we have with students is about choosing roommates. How are they going to get along with living with another person? They could be in a triple, they could be in a quad. being independent and on their own, which is another piece that's on here too. So there's a lot of different worries that students will go through this year in terms of thinking about that. For our senior survey last year, our graduating class of 2019, we created a senior survey. One of the questions is asking, just to determine the stress level throughout this process, what are the top 3 stressors that you felt during your application process? This is pretty consistent from year to year that we've noticed, but the biggest thing is the academic pressure and the grades. Students, we all know, and I actually talked with one student this morning that said that first quarter grade is extremely important, right? That mid-quarter grade is extremely important as well, because we automatically send them the mid-quarter grades to colleges. Most colleges ask for them. And then we automatically send the final transcript to colleges. So for seniors, this is just a beginning of the year message for you. Work hard and consistently throughout the year as possible. Do not get senioritis. Here's why I'm going to tell you that. Last year, and every once in a while, we have students, if your grades dip at the end of the school year, we actually had a school contact us and ask what were the reasons for your grades dropping. Because when colleges accept you, they're accepting you on the basis of how you are doing academically at the time of acceptance. So there's an expectation that you will keep those grades up, okay? So what stress can you do? What can you do to help reduce some of that stress? Give yourself a lot of time to meet those deadlines. If you know you're a procrastinator, I want you to make sure you get in and make those individual appointments with your counselor quickly. If you know that, so that we can help you plan things out and chunk out the time and pieces that you need to, okay? Make sure that you're applying to an after school that you want to go to. This is where I see a lot of students, when it comes close to the deadline, students start to panic about what schools, should I apply to this school or that school? I'm going to add on one more, another one. My friend's going there, my boyfriend and girlfriend are going there, this one is just close to home, but I don't like it as much, but it's okay. Or I have a free application fee for me to apply. So what you want to think about is when you're applying to the colleges, your entire list, no matter what school you get into, you're going to be happy going to. So if you apply to 8 colleges, and that last school on your list, you should be doing the same research, the same amount of research on every single school, and you should like every single school. Even if it's that last school and the only school that you get into, you should feel happy. So that's what a college list is. It isn't putting all of your emotional eggs into one basket in the top 1 or 2. It's making sure that you put equal weight in all of the schools. All right, seniors, you ready for this question? Who here gets 8 hours of sleep a night? Okay. Anybody get more than 8? You're a superstar. You got a few. Who here gets 7 hours of sleep a night? 6? 5? Okay. I'm not going to go lower. Here's what I want you guys to think about, and parents to help your students. You need to sleep. The reason why is because we've got a lot going on. Sometimes some students, you're going to feel like the application process is another class. Make sure you get plenty of sleep, because you're in school all day to learn, and then you do your sports activities, you go home, you do your homework. You need to sleep, okay? If you're not recharging yourself, and I'll talk about the application workshops and the stress workshops that we're going to be doing in English classes. I've actually seen students sleeping through class because they didn't get enough sleep after I talked to them. Okay? So think about that when you're in class. You've got to make sure you get plenty of rest. Here's what I tell all of my students. Take your 2 hands and put these blinders on. Do not look at what your friends are doing to the left or right of you. I think students spend way too much time comparing who's applying where, right? You know, you all do this, what your test scores are. it's your own personal process. You don't even have to tell anybody except for your counselor and your parents where you're applying to. It's your own process, because if you get caught up in that stress, and we've watched students do that, it really takes a toll on you. So just be careful about that. So just focus on yourself and what your process is. What school is right for you is not right for the person sitting next to you. So just keep that in mind. So this is just a graph of the graduates, U.S. public and non-public high school graduates. And you can kind of see we are 2020. We're a little bit of a low point before we start hitting the next big peak. So in terms of the number of students that are applying, you think about what the opportunities are in terms of how many applications that are out there. A lot of times what colleges do is they report out. The way colleges report in terms of admissions is what percent of students are getting into their college, right? So for instance, some Ivy League schools might have a 5% acceptance rate. I mean, that's pretty concerning, pretty challenging, but you have to look at the number of students that are applying, and there's a video I'll show at the end that talks a little bit about how those numbers are put into place. So just in terms of the nuts and bolts of the application process, students at this time, you should be at least researching 10 to 20 schools. You should have at least narrowed that down. In terms of applying, you need to consider applying between usually 5 to 9 schools, maybe 10, maybe a dozen. When you get to more than a dozen, and every college admissions person that I've ever talked with will start asking students why. Why do you need to apply to that many? Because you haven't done the research. You haven't figured out what it is that you want in a college. So that's where they start to kind of question that piece. Usually it's a couple of reach schools, a couple of target schools that are good chances you can get into, likely schools that very likely you get into, and a couple of safety schools that you have a very good chance of getting into. Keep an open mind. When we look for best fit, we're not looking for the brand name, okay? So in terms of colleges, this is everyone's reach. When we start to look at some of the stats of students, the number of students that actually apply, nearly everyone's reach. Okay, what does best fit mean? This term we've been using for years. The colleges talk about the best fit. What does best fit mean? For us, what we look at best fit in 3 categories. In terms of the social, does it provide a community that feels like home? Does it feels like home doesn't mean that you're home at your house, but a place that you feel very comfortable in, that you're going to be actively getting out there, involved in the community, doing volunteer service, playing sports, getting involved in the community, because having those connections is what's going to keep you at the school. Academically, what's an academic fit? It's how you learn. How well do you know you learn? Some students will do better in a lecture style. Some students will learn better with experiential learning, and a lot of colleges are really putting a lot of advertising on that piece. I've seen a lot of that lately. How do you best learn? And the colleges that you're applying to, do they offer that for you? So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. In December, I do an alumni panel. And one year I had a student who went to a very high-performing school, and she said she walked into an intro class, and it was 500 students, much like this auditorium. For some students, they will feel lost in that, but some students will feel like they thrive in a situation like that. So you really need to learn to know how you learn best, so that you can help. That will help guide you to what kind of school you're looking for. And everyone forgets the financial fit. I think we spend so much time thinking about what's our best fit, where we're going to invest all of our energy, all of our emotional, but like I said before, emotional eggs into one basket. I think we forget about that financial fit, and I think that's a conversation that we need to have as a family in terms of what that's going to look like. Okay, so looking at the components of the application process, I will go through these quickly because it's a lot of information, but the information will be available to students as well. We're going to be taking students to the classroom. So the application itself, there's a common app. Some schools have their own specific applications that are separate from that. So those are the two that we encounter the most. There's also the letters of recommendations. It's most schools, we ask for 2 teacher letters of recommendation. So I just want to clarify very specifically, 2 academic teachers. That doesn't include administrator one, it doesn't include, the council one is not considered a teacher one. So they usually ask for 2 academic teachers, students who have questions. This is part of the conversation that you'll have with your counselors. Standardized tests, SATs, ACTs, subject tests. So any standardized test, I'm seeing more and more, this is an ever-changing list of schools that are going test optional. With that said, now when I'm seeing more of schools that are going test optional, you've got to be really careful when you look at that. Some schools who go test optional will say, we want a graded paper as an option. We want you to submit a project as a different option if you're not submitting your test scores. So it's individual to each school, so you've got to make sure you look at that carefully. The school council packet, that includes your transcript, the letter of recommendation from counselors after you meet with them, and your letters of recommendations. Those are the things that we send out. And deadlines, you've got to meet your deadlines. So here are the things, students. This process is not like submitting a paper late for a class where the teacher might give you a late grade. When you miss a college deadline, you really do miss it. I've only had one incident where a student was trying to argue that piece with the college, but if you miss a deadline, you really do miss it. So with deadlines, I'm going to say one thing. Do not wait until 11 p.m. before the deadline. I can't tell you how many schools their sites might crash because everybody's procrastinating and doing that. So give yourself a little bit of room and make sure that you plan that out carefully. Admissions options, I'm not going to go over every single one of these, but I'm going to go over just the 3 general ones. Regular decision deadlines are, it's non-binding, it's usually a little bit of a later deadline. Rolling admissions, you'll see some schools rolling admissions with maybe a deadline of March 1st or March 31st, or it could be May. Rolling admissions means that they will accept applications as they come in. So if there, say, for instance, if there's 2,000 spots in the next graduating class, as students apply and they accept students and the students commit to those schools, those spots will fill up along the way. Early action means you can apply early. It's an earlier deadline. The colleges will tell you earlier, but it's non-binding, which means you don't have to commit to that school until May 1st. Early decision is a binding contract. So if you're applying early decision, this is a school that you know you want to go to this school above all else, no matter what. You love this school. Everything is a perfect fit for you. That is one reason to apply for early decision. With early decision, there is a form that your parents sign, you sign, and your counselor signs. It's a binding contract. Most, for all schools with early decision, if you get accepted early decision, you have to agree to withdraw your applications from all other schools. Okay? Sometimes the timeline gets a little tricky. Students try to gauge in December when they're going to hear from another school before they hear from the early decision. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Whoops. All right, the deadlines. General deadlines are usually November 1st or November 15th, December 1st. The 1st and the 15th of the month are the usual deadlines. State colleges, private college, university deadlines usually begin around January 1st. Those are the regular decision deadlines. California does everything differently. So California deadlines are earlier. Usually it's by November 30th. So if you're thinking about applying to California colleges, certainly make an appointment to your school counselor sooner rather than later. They have a different process. Students actually report out their own classes and grades. So a lot of it's self-reporting the way that they do it, but certainly that's something that your counselor can help you through that process. Standardized tests. This is the SAT schedule for this upcoming year. And this is the ACT. And again, one question that we get a lot of is, when I take these tests, will it get to the colleges on time by their early action deadline? Pretty much yes, but you can call the schools individually just to double check to make sure that they're accepting them. Score choice. This is where you can actually pick and choose which scores that you want to send to the colleges. This is just an example for score choice. In this example, if you're looking at the reading, writing, the math, you can submit, this person should submit their June and October SAT scores. So College Board allows you to do this. However, most colleges do something that's called super scoring, where they get all of the scores and they take the highest of each individual one and they call that your score. Okay? Some of the colleges that I've talked to actually say they don't even see all of your scores. It's automatically super scored, and that's how they get your application packet. That's what they read. There are some few selected colleges out there still require you to submit all of your SAT test dates or ACT test dates. They look at everything. Okay, so few colleges do. Again, looking at optional, fairtest.org is a great website if you want to look at this ever-changing list of schools that are going test optional, and sending your scores. So over the years, the College Board has gone through a lot of changes, have had a lot of feedback from a lot of different constituents. So one of the responses for the colleges right now, I'm seeing a lot more colleges doing something that's called self-reporting test scores. So on the application, you self-report your test scores, and if you get accepted to the college and go, that's when you send your actual test score to the college. Okay, so you make sure that you send it accurately. The reason why they're doing this is, and I want to say the last time I remember somebody sending a test score to colleges, it was like $11.25. I don't know if that fee's gone up, but if you're applying to 10 colleges, that's a lot of money. So colleges are starting to recognize this, and they're allowing students to self-report their test scores, but making sure that if you get accepted, you attend, you send out your actual scores from the College Board to that school. Some schools do that, but the schools who do not, you still have to send it directly to the colleges. Okay, students, you have to do that from your accounts through the College Board or the ACT organization. Common App is where we link how we send out transcripts. There's a link with Naviance that we send out transcripts. So when we go into the classroom with students, we'll be helping all students do this. Next week, counselors will be in the classroom for 2 days. One to do the application workshop, which will get students started on the Common App and making sure they make that link and give them a checklist, and then get them all excited for the application process. And then the next day we do a stress reduction workshop and take students down. So just to keep everything into perspective. Types of applications, the Common Application takes a lot of schools. Like I said, there are a few schools who have their own form. They want to do their own thing, and that's okay. We work on that as well. Most schools prefer the online process rather than if a school actually has the paper copy with that. Recommendations. Again, 2 teacher recommendations, counselor recommendations. Not all schools require council recommendation. Again, most students have asked teachers in the spring. We've taken you through that process in the spring already as juniors. Council recommendations, you must make an appointment and sit down and meet with your counselor and complete your bio survey in Naviance. in order for us to write the letter of recommendation. I get tons and tons of questions on supplemental recommendations. Students want recommendations from their coach, they want one from their boss. Certainly if there's something that you're doing something that's not reflected in your whole application, that could be a possibility. But colleges do not want you to send too many. So what's too many? 2 years ago, we had UMass Amherst here for an admissions information session, and she's our reader. She said 1 year she received an application with 17 letters of recommendations. And they did not read that application. So here's what I would recommend. What the colleges put out there for you to submit, I would keep within that as much as possible. If you have any questions, please meet with your school counselor. Once in a while you get one or two, which is fine, additional that gives a different side of you, but just be careful that you don't go overboard in this process. A close friend of mine worked in admissions a long time ago, and I asked her, how many applications do you read a day? And she said about 50. I said, well, how much time? It's very hard to get someone to actually pin down a time that they actually read an application that you've spent months on. It could be up to 15 minutes. That's generous, depending on the school. So, so think about how much you're submitting for that. For us here at Shrewsbury High School, we have a 1 month rule. You need to meet with your counselor or your teacher at least a month before your first deadline. Okay, you need to give people time to write letters of recommendations. For teachers, you need to ask them early as well, because there are only so many days that teachers have to actually to write them. So make sure it's at least a month before. All right, this time I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Ariel, who is going to do the procedures.
Hi. Again, my name is Miss Ariel, and I'm going to talk to you about the next two pieces of this process. And mostly, it's going to focus on how both you and your student can interact with our office to make sure that things go smoothly. So one of the most important things that has to happen between your student and that student's counselor is completing the transcript request form. There is a fee, $5 per transcript. There was a time several years ago where students even had to supply postage and self-addressed envelopes. That's no longer, as Mrs. Wynn mentioned. Everything goes electronically now. However, the transcript request form is our checkpoint with your student. It helps us understand if they've completed every single bit of the process, and it's like a final stopgap between their process and us sending their materials. We need at least 10 school days to complete that, 10 school days before the deadline. You'll notice the deadlines behind me. So again, if you want to take a picture of that, the slides will be online tomorrow, but these are pretty firm. This is the time you need to process all of your applications correctly and smoothly. This is one of our largest classes. I think we're standing at 505 students. As Mrs. Wynn said, if every student applied to between 5 and 10 colleges, we're near 5,000 transactions that we're making on behalf of our students. So these deadlines we ask you to adhere to. During the mid-year and end of school time, our office will automatically send a transcript to whatever school that we already have on file for you. So again, once we do that transcript request with you, those schools get stored in Naviance, and automatically at mid-year, so after semester 1, And at the end of the year, when you tell us what school you're going to, we automatically send an updated transcript. We get this question a lot. Students will begin hearing from colleges somewhere around the end of January or early February, and they panic. They say, oh no, I'm getting all these emails. They need my transcript. Have no fear, rest assured, as long as we've done a transcript request with you, we will be sending automatically those transcripts to those schools. And you can see at the end of the year, they all go out around mid-June, once the seniors tell us where they're enrolling. So you heard us mention our curriculum with our seniors. Next week we are going into all of your English classes, and we will conduct a 2-day workshop with you. One will be all about the finer details of making sure that each and every one of you are set up to, again, successfully have us send your documents and make sure everything goes smoothly. You're going to get a timeline of sorts, and we're going to make sure that your Naviance account is set up properly and that your Common App account is set up properly. So one big thing, I know I love this, we do have a parent brag sheet. I find this extremely helpful. Sometimes your students leave out some of the really good stuff about them, and only get that sometimes from parents, and I love it. It's probably my favorite part of writing letters of recommendation. We have these kids in our office at our self-serve station, those black letter trays in our office. You can grab one, bring it home. This is also on our website. You can email it to us. Your student can bring it in, whatever's easier for you, but I know this is a really great part of the whole process for us, so we hope you do it. Helps us write their letter of recommendation. The other part that we need in order to write your letter of recommendation is for you to complete a bio survey for us, for your counselors. This is done electronically in your Naviance account, and it's under, just as you see, surveys not started and bio survey. If you've already done this, don't hesitate to send your counselor a quick email that says, already did that, mine's done. We can take a look at that. If you haven't done it, I would spend some time on it. Okay, it's several questions long, but again, it helps us write a really thorough recommendation for you. The next part that goes to colleges, again, as we've talked about, is a copy of your transcript. So we will send transcripts periodically throughout your senior year to your colleges. The first transcript that some people see, some colleges see, will just be a transcript that includes 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. That's usually for those kids that are applying really early, so like those November 1, November 15th deadlines. After that, deadlines after that, it's very likely that colleges will receive grades 9, 10, and 11, and that quarter 1 grade in that grade 12 block. Then colleges also receive, as I said, the semester 1 transcript, and then finally at the end of the year, colleges receive a final transcript for you based on where you've enrolled. So this is definitely part of the packet that we send to schools. The other part that is included is what we call our school profile. And this has all the information about Shrewsbury High School that colleges require of us. Nothing that your student needs to do with this. It's part of our responsibility to send to colleges, and it outlines our programming, our test scores on average, the number of classes that we offer and at what level. So it's some of the demographic information about the high school. So this is also part of the packet that we send off to colleges. Additionally, for those students that are considering D1, Division I, or Division II athletics in college, you do need to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. It's a very important step. If you're not registered with the NCAA, it could delay you beginning your season when you go to college, so it is very important. See your counselors if you have more questions about that. And also, any of our students with learning differences, this is also an important part. There is another step for those of you that might be on a 504 or an IEP. There's another form that we have to fill out with you that gives us permission to send your information on your behalf or not. You can choose whether or not you want any of your documentation to go to colleges. The important piece to remember about this is that once you get to school, it really is then up to you to identify yourself in whatever office offers services to kids with any kind of learning difference. The colleges are not going to seek you out. It's not what they do. They will sit back and they will wait for you to come in and say, this is what I used in high school, this is what I found helpful. Can I use some of these same accommodations here on your campus? So if this is a consideration for any of you, I would definitely make this a conversation or a point of contact when you're on a campus. I would make sure that you're reaching out to someone in this office, okay? And again, just ask your counselor if you have any questions about that. All right, so further, there are a couple things that each part of us have to do during this process, and you'll see them listed here. There's bits for you to do as a student, for you to do as parents, and for us to do as a school. So let's break some of that down. All right, so things that you, the student, should be doing. Definitely schedule an appointment with your counselor. That's very important so that we know your plans and we can help you achieve your goals in the college application process. Make sure you're registering for any testing. Okay, there are still some dates available for this early fall, so make sure you're registering for SATs, ACTs, and that you're sending your scores. And again, we can answer questions about that. If you haven't already asked your teachers about letters of recommendation, now is the time, okay? Completing your application, obviously, that's a big part of it. Your essay, also a huge part of it. And checking to see if your applications require any supplements, okay? So supplements can come in all different forms. A supplement to an application could be an additional essay. It could be just some short answer questions, but the Common App or the school-specific application, they'll be very clear about whether or not that school has supplements that are required of you. So that shouldn't be a surprise, okay? The College and Career Planning Portfolio is online in your Schoology resource folder. So again, it's a really handy source of information if you can't get to your counselor right away. All right, that is in there. So then for parents, I think having lots of conversations, frank conversations about some of your students' choices, making sure you and your student understand deadlines and that you're reviewing them, visiting schools whenever possible, talk through any changes in the plan. A lot of times we'll hear from kids, oh yeah, I got this. Here's my 6 schools, I'm good to go. And then we may get an email from a parent later that same day that says, oh, I hope they gave you the list of the 22 schools, and, you know. So we really need to have you be communicating, make sure that if there are any changes to your student's plan, that they know it. I think one recommendation we have for families is to try and set aside a specific time to talk about these things. It can get overwhelming if you're trying to have these conversations and you're trying to make decisions about some of these things every single day. So try and set aside some time for that. This begins the process of letting your student take the lead This is a very scary prospect for some people. It was for me too. My own son went off to college and I thought, there's no way he's going to be able to navigate all this. And he did, and he does, with the occasional phone call home. But this is the time, to begin letting your students sort of take the lead in this process. It's a really big wake-up call not to be able to have access to their grades all of a sudden when they go to college. You get the bill, no questions there, but it's really interesting not to be able to have that same access, and now's the time. Now's the time to let them see what they can do. It's kind of exciting. For our part, we've already discussed some of the ways that we'll handle the student packet from our end. Teachers write the letter of recommendation, of course, and we have two wonderful people in our office, Mrs. Gail King and Mrs. Martha Murphy, who are the ones that will literally touch every single one of the applications that goes out, the student packets that go out on your behalf. Mrs. King is our registrar. They are wonderful. And so there are lots of people sort of at school too working behind the scenes to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible for your students. So in a nutshell, there's a little bit of this triangle that everybody takes. Okay, the student has a piece, the student and the counselor have to do a piece together, and then the student and the parents. The key word is the students in every single one of those. So we really need you to be communicating with us, communicating with your families, so that we can make sure that everything's going smoothly for you in this process. One of the things I also want to point out on that parent one is the financial aid piece. Very important to be meeting financial aid deadlines as well. They are different than college deadlines, college application deadlines. So your student could have an application deadline of November 1st. The financial aid deadline for the FAFSA or another one called the CSS profile could be a totally different deadline. That is also a firm deadline. They are not flexible about that. If you miss the financial aid deadlines, I hate to say it, you're kind of sunk for that year with financial aid. So it's very important, again, when you're sitting down and talking with your student, to look at both the application deadline and the financial aid deadlines so that you're meeting both of those deadlines on time. I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Wynn. Thanks so much.
I have a couple of announcements just to add to that, to reduce some of the panic that we see sometimes happens. When you apply to colleges, you receive, for a lot of schools, a portal that you can access to see where you are within the application process. Oftentimes, colleges will email you and tell you your transcript is not there, your recommendation's not there. Here's where the panic happens. Students, you are welcome to come in and talk to Mrs. King or Mrs. Murphy and check to see when it was sent. We can see when colleges actually receive it and download it. For years, what's happened in the past is that colleges will send these blanket emails out and put people in a panic and say, if you haven't received any of your materials, we are happy to call the college on your behalf. A lot of times when we call, I want to say a couple of years ago, there was one college in Maine that put a lot of people in a panic, and they basically said, we are so overloaded, we've received so many applications, we don't have the manpower, it's going to take 2 additional weeks. But yet at the same time, because of their electronic system, they're sending out massive emails to all their applicants saying they're missing the data, the information when it's already there. So just check with us. The communication is going to be key to keep that stress level down, and we're happy to communicate with the colleges directly. One other big change, I know we have a lot of students who apply to UMass Amherst that I want you to be aware of. One change they have to the application process this year. So when their early application deadline in November is, I believe, November 5th. We'll have to double check, don't correct me, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in the past, because our first quarter grades are not yet available, they've allowed all schools to submit transcripts up until November 20th. They are no longer allowing that. So they have a hard deadline of their early application deadline. So those first quarter grades may not make it, which means, and they're very transparent on how they do things. So if you're considering applying to UMass Amherst and you feel really great about your transcript, your recommendations, and everything, the whole package, you feel really strong, very strong about that, definitely do the early application. Here's how they do things that is a little bit different than other schools, and they are very open about this. If you apply early action, you're applying with a lot of the cream of the crop students, and that's what you're competing with, that applicant pool. If you, so your results would either be you would get denied, or you would be accepted, or you would be deferred to the regular admissions. If you are deferred to regular admissions, this is how they handle it. They will go through all of the applications for the regular decision deadlines. After that's through, then they will go to all of the applications that were deferred from the early action. So it's important for you to talk with your counselor about where you stand in terms of your whole package and what you should do at that point if you have any questions about that. So just so that you're aware, that's one change that they've made this year in terms of not accepting transcripts after November 5th. So it's whatever's going to be on those grades, those first quarter grades may not count, okay? So you can certainly check. All right, next steps. Financial aid night. You can register for that. That's going to be on Thursday, October 3rd, right here. We have someone from me for presenting and going over the entire FAFSA process for you. I'm going to give you my 2 cents on varsity blues. What does this mean for you? Things have changed so much over the application process after this. These are just a couple of headlines I threw up there. Things that we are seeing that they are going to really scrutinize test scores, making sure that they're accurate. They're going to really look at the accuracy, the authenticity of your applications. An example is when we had our college planning night back in the spring. If you remember, Clark University said they received one application and they actually added all of the hours of a student's activity sheet, and it totaled to more than, because the way that you do it, they total it more to what's available of hours in a week. That student couldn't sleep. It's impossible to do that much. Okay, so thank you for coming to the main session. At this time, what we'll do is we're going to do breakout sessions. So you can look at where your name is in the alphabet.